Hello, and live from ChefConf, this is Lucas Welch with Chef. I'm here with Matt Wrock from CenturyLink Cloud. Matt, thank you so much for being here today, and welcome to ChefConf.
Thank you.
So, I've read about the life of an automation junkie, and I'd like to know what that's like for you.
So, one way to look at an automation junkie is kind of like one that takes a hit for the team, right? So there's something very special about taking something that involves so much pain and taking that pain away, so that a larger team can experience, whether it be a deployment or building a server, in a very unpainful way. In fact, uneventful and boring is what I like to call it.
The more boring, the better.
Exactly,
because then
right.
Nothing's going wrong.
Exactly, that's right. So I really take a lot of pleasure in that. I think there's a lot of challenges involved with that, which I find fun, and I started doing this 4 years ago, really kind of in depth, and it's been a lot of fun, a lot of pain involved, but you emerge from that, and it's
well. That's actually one of the things I've been hearing quite frequently here at ChefConf is you gotta have to go through the pain to learn the right way to do things. And even that video this morning, right, with Adam and Nathan, it's like failure is an opportunity to learn. That's
actually very true. That's a different type of pain, but I think with Chef particularly, there's certain concepts that it's such a big tool, and there's so many different things. There's so many ways that you can use it, and you hear a lot of conflicting messages in the community. Like, for example, roles is a great example. Don't use roles. You'll hear from some people, or use roles in these cases, but not in these cases. Then other people, I always use roles. What are you talking about?
Use roles.
And so, eventually, you just got to use roles, and maybe you don't use them across your entire infrastructure, but you kind of have to let yourself get poked by that pain and see how you feel is the best way for you and your solution to react to that.
Yeah, and so. You're relatively new to the chef ecosystem, chef community, and was your talk earlier today? Or
just a little bit ago. Yeah.
Awesome. And how did it go?
Went great. It went good.
Awesome.
I felt good about
it. And so one of the things you were talking about was coming into the chef community, but open source communities in general, from a specifically Windows perspective. And I'd love to hear a little bit more about best practices, recommendations, what to-dos, what not to-dos when you're coming into a new technology community, and maybe specifically from a Windows background into the chef community.
Sure. So just generically, whether or not you're coming into, if it's new Windows or not, one thing that helped me a lot, so I hadn't touched Linux in 10 years, and I knew that I was going to be working with Linux quite a bit. So full immersion, it works for vocal languages, it works for computer languages and operating systems. So I made sure that my work laptop had Ubuntu installed as the main operating system, and day in, day out, I worked on that. I wasn't as productive on my first day, but it was a forcing factor to get to know stuff. The other thing is reading code. So one thing that really helped me in learning Ruby, and I still have so much to learn, but one thing that really helped me coming up to speed in that, it's also helped me just previously in C# with a language that I'm already knowledgeable about, is looking at code that mimics good patterns, good practices. You learn a lot from that. And then when you contribute that code, which is the next step, it gives you the opportunity to interact with people, and usually they're the people that own those repositories and contribute to them that typically know more than you do. So that's a great learning experience, short of having somebody actually sitting next to you.
Yeah, and you're bringing in a number of different perspectives, many of which may have more information on a particular thing than you might have at the time.
Right.
And you can kind of pick and choose the information that's most applicable to you.
Exactly. Right. I've gotten a good breadth. I've worked with Fletcher. I've worked with people inside and outside of Chef, and I feel like that's really been good at kind of just giving me just little tips and tricks here and there.
That's awesome. Yeah. And so one of the things we really appreciate is that you've been blogging pretty frequently about using Chef with Windows, how you're doing that at CenturyLink, and a big thing here at ChefConf and in the chef community is transparency, sharing best practices and the challenges that people run into, because we're all trying to get to the same place. So I'd love to know a little bit more about what your CenturyLink setup looks like, how you're using Chef, the experiences with Windows, good and bad. Kind of walk me through that.
So at Chef, we're a mixed shop, like I think most shops out there. So we're a little bit more Linux than we are Windows in terms of infrastructure. In terms of knowledge, I'd say we're actually, a lot of the people that work for CenturyLink Cloud come from Microsoft. So you just have a lot of Windows heritage there. So I'd say though that unanimously we find in terms of automation, it's easier automating Linux, regardless of our limited knowledge with Linux than Windows. Just given the history of that operating system, with Windows, oftentimes it feels like you're going against the grain.
Yeah.
It's like you feel like you're trying to automate something that wasn't the primary use case.
Yep.
And it wasn't the primary use case, and that's okay. Yep. But now you're given a job to automate it. Now, fortunately, like if we were having this conversation 5 years from now, there's some things I don't even know if I could automate. So thankfully, thanks to things like PowerShell, now you have DSC coming out. My hope is that 5 years.
I was talking to Jeffrey earlier.
Yeah.
Really fascinating guy.
Yeah, so like 5 years from now in the future, I think the gap is closing.
Yeah.
So it's there's some distinct challenges that I think, but part of that is the fun, right? Like it's not fun if it's not challenging. It's not fun if you're trying to solve a problem that somebody else has already solved. Yeah. So it's like you feel like you're in the wild west, and that's part of the
sense of adventure.
Yeah, totally, and that's part of the reason why I've been keeping up my blog is because this is information that I've been having a hard time getting, which is always your key to write a blog post.
I mean, you're filling a gap. And earlier, I was actually speaking with John Cowie. Have you met John? So John works at Etsy, and he wrote the book Customizing Chef.
Yeah.
And it was a very similar principle. He came into the chef community, saw that there was a gap, couldn't find that information, started on the adventure right in the wild west himself, and came around to, okay, well, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to fill the information gap. I'm going to put that information out there. I think it's awesome that you've been doing the same thing. And I know that there's been a number of people, even though I'm not the most technical of folks, that have come up to me and been like, man, I was reading Matt's blog. That's awesome, because that was information I was looking for.
Yeah, I mean, that is very rewarding, especially like when you realize, so every single one of those blog posts, there's tears behind that post, right?
Yes, yes.
Like at some point, like I'm banging my head against the wall.
There's that pain that we were talking about earlier.
Yeah. So I'm hoping I can save other people pain, but it's also a venting process. It's like a cathartic experience of writing these blog posts.
So speaking of both a cathartic experience and the evolution, how would you say the Chef Windows story has evolved over the past year?
I'd say it definitely has. So one thing I mentioned in my talk 9 months ago, when I was asking about Test Kitchen, and people were telling me about Test Kitchen, basically I was told that Test Kitchen, you could not run Test Kitchen against Windows without having SSH on Windows, and so I'm happy to say that today that is not the case. So it's with some of the DSC resources, that's gotten cleaned up. So when they were first coming out with some of the DSC integration and the recipes, it was a little rocky. I think that's definitely gotten has definitely gotten better. So it's definitely, no doubt of it. ChefDK has been huge, whether or not you're on Windows or not, but especially if you're on Windows and you're new to Ruby, it kind of provides a nice environment kind of helps you to fall into that pit of success, so to speak. It just takes away some of the immediate roadblocks that you...
We all want to fall into a pit of success.
Yeah, that sounds awesome, right?
That sounds great.
It's going to be a pit.
That's the only pit that I intend to fall into is the pit of success. So I think we'll finish up with the question that I think is most important here, is which animal lends itself to the best home videos? Is it the dog or the cat, and why?
You're asking me a very, very difficult question. Perhaps a question that's impossible to be answered. Out of fairness to both my cats and my dogs, I will say that there's no right answer.
There's no right answer. Really, you want a video with a puppy and a kitten.
Absolutely, preferably spooning is good. So I haven't been able to capture that yet.
Yes.
My dogs are.
It might be in the pit of success.
right. Yes.
That's where we may find that particular video.
I'm gonna have to get a pit and put some success in there.
There we go, and then you'll find a puppy and a kitten spooning. That's awesome. Well, Matt, thank you so much for being here and spending the time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.